I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. When you're standing at the altar, looking into the eyes of someone who loves you completely, who knows every broken piece of you, and still chose to stay, when you're holding that person's hand and feeling their pulse through their fingertips, you don't think you're capable of destroying it all. You don't think you're the kind of person who could take something pure and beautiful and burn it to ash just because you fell an itch you couldn't scratch. But I was that person. My name is Marcus, and 6 years ago, I married the love of my life. Her name was Sophie. I'm using past tense not because she's dead, but because the Sophie I knew, the one who laughed at my terrible jokes and fell asleep on my shoulder during movies, that Sophie doesn't exist anymore. I killed her. Not with my hands, but with my choices. 3 months ago, I came home to an empty house. No note, no forwarding address. Just the echo of my own footsteps in rooms that used to be filled with her presence. And on the kitchen counter, where she used to leave me little notes telling me she loved me, there was just one thing. Our wedding photo, face down, with a single word written on the back in her handwriting. Finally, I didn't understand what she meant then. But I would. Oh God, I would understand everything, and the truth would be so much worse than I ever imagined. I met Sophie in college. She wasn't the kind of girl who turned heads when she walked into a room. Not because she wasn't beautiful, but because her beauty was the quiet kind. The kind you had to pay attention to notice. Brown hair that caught gold in the sunlight. Eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. A laugh that sounded like wind chimes. I was loud, confident, the guy everyone knew at parties. She was in the library, always studying, always working towards something bigger than herself. She wanted to be a pediatric nurse. She wanted to help kids who couldn't help themselves. We were opposites, and somehow that made us perfect. Our first date was at a terrible Chinese restaurant where the egg rolls were soggy and the fortune cookies were stale. I made her laugh so hard that orange soda came out of her nose, and I remember thinking right then that I wanted to spend the rest of my life making her laugh like that. We dated for 4 years. I proposed on the same spot where we had that first date. They'd renovated the place, but I bribed the owner to let me set up candles in the back corner booth. She said yes before I even finished asking. Our wedding was small, just family and close friends. Her father walked her down the aisle, and I swear to God, I've never seen anything more beautiful than Sophie in that moment. The dress was simple. She'd insisted on buying it secondhand because we were saving for a house, but she glowed. She absolutely glowed. When she said her vows, her voice cracked. She told me I was her best friend, her safe place, her home. I promised her forever. I meant it. I really did. The first 3 years of our marriage were everything I dreamed of. We bought a small house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom ranch with a backyard Sophie immediately filled with flowers. She got her nursing degree and started working at Children's Memorial Hospital. I worked in sales for a tech company. We weren't rich, but we were happy. We had date nights every Friday. We took weekend trips to nowhere in particular. We talked about having kids someday, about growing old together, about all the beautiful, mundane moments we'd share. And then I met Vanessa. She started at my company as a marketing executive. Tall, with dark hair and red lipstick that seemed permanently applied. She wore power suits and high heels that clicked authoritatively across the office floor. She was everything Sophie wasn't. Bold, assertive, commanding attention the moment she entered a room. I told myself it was nothing, just a professional relationship, just friendly conversations by the coffee machine. But I felt it, that pull, that electric charge when she laughed at my jokes, the way my pulse quickened when I saw her name on an email. I started staying late at work, not because I had to, but because Vanessa was often there too, and our conversations became longer, more personal. She told me about her divorce, about how her ex-husband had been boring, predictable. She said she needed passion in her life. Fire. The way she looked at me when she said it made my stomach flip. Sophie noticed I was coming home later. She'd ask if everything was okay at work, and I'd kiss her forehead and tell her I was fine, just busy. She'd made dinner, my favorite, usually, and we'd eat together while she told me about her day, about the sick kid she was helping, about how little Timmy in room 304 had finally smiled for the first time since his surgery. I'd nod and respond in the right places, but my mind was elsewhere. On Vanessa, on the way she'd touched my arm that afternoon when she left, on the text message she'd sent me that evening. Working late makes me think of you. Is that wrong? I should have told Sophie then. I should have shown her that message and explained that something dangerous was developing, that I needed her help to shut it down. But I didn't. Instead, I deleted the message and told Vanessa the next day that we should keep things professional. She smiled. Of course, she said. Professional. But her eyes said something else entirely. It happened 2 months later. We'd gone to a conference in Chicago. Me, Vanessa, and 3 other colleagues. It was supposed to be a 2-day trip. Network, attend seminars, represent the company. The first night, after the conference events ended, our group went to a hotel bar. Drinks flowed. Laughter echoed. One by one, the others drifted off to their rooms until it was just Vanessa and me, sitting in a leather booth, the city lights of Chicago spreading out through the windows behind us. She told me I seemed unhappy, that she could see it in my eyes, this restlessness, this feeling of being trapped. I told her she was wrong. I told her I love my wife. She leaned closer. Do you? Or do you love the idea of who you're supposed to be? Her perfume was intoxicating. Her hand was on my knee, and I made a choice that would haunt me for the rest of my life, that I told myself it was just once. Just one night. Sophie would never know, and what she didn't know couldn't hurt her. I told myself a lot of lies that night. But the biggest lie was that it would ever really be over. I came home from Chicago feeling like my skin was covered in oil. Greasy. Dirty. Wrong. Sophie was at the door when I arrived, wearing one of my old t-shirts and sweatpants, her hair in a messy bun. She threw her arms around me and told me she'd missed me. She smelled like vanilla and home. I held her and felt like I was going to be sick. Over the next few weeks, I tried to go back to normal. I tried to pretend Chicago hadn't happened. Vanessa and I barely spoke at work. When we did, it was clipped professional. I thought maybe we could both just forget it. But guilt is a living thing. It grows inside you like a parasite, feeding on your thoughts, your sleep, your peace. I started having nightmares. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, convinced Sophie somehow knew. I'd look over at her, sleeping peacefully beside me, and the guilt would crush me all over again. I became distant. I couldn't help it. When Sophie tried to be intimate, I'd make excuses, tired, stressed, not feeling well. She'd look hurt, but never pushed. She was patient with me, always so patient, and that made it worse. Then Vanessa texted me. We need to talk. Coffee. I should have said no. I should have blocked her number right then and there. But I met her. She was sitting in the back of a Starbucks, sunglasses on even though we were indoors. She looked nervous, which was unusual for her. Vanessa never looked nervous. She told me she was pregnant. The world tilted. I remember gripping the edge of the table, feeling like gravity had stopped working. I asked her if she was sure. She showed me the test on her phone, a photo of those 2 unmistakable pink lines. I asked her what she wanted to do. She told me she was keeping it. She wasn't asking for anything from me. No money, no relationship. She just thought I had a right to know. I drove home in a daze. I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before I could force myself to go inside. Sophie was making dinner, humming to herself, completely oblivious to the fact that my entire life had just detonated. I almost told her that night. The words were right there, sitting on my tongue like poison. But then she turned around, spatula in hand, and smiled at me with such pure, uncomplicated love that I chickened out. I told myself I'd tell her soon. I told myself I needed to figure things out first. What I didn't know was that Vanessa had no intention of staying silent. 2 weeks after Vanessa told me about the pregnancy, she called me in a panic. She'd miscarried, and in that moment, I felt something that made me hate myself even more than I already did. Relief. Pure, shameful relief. But Vanessa didn't take the miscarriage well. She started calling me constantly, crying, saying she needed me. I tried to be supportive from a distance, but she wanted more. She wanted me to leave Sophie. She said we'd had something real in Chicago, something she'd never felt before. I told her it had been a mistake. She told me I was lying to myself. Our arguments became more frequent, more intense. She started showing up at my office unannounced. She'd corner me in the parking lot, begging me to give us a real chance. I was terrified Sophie would find out. I became paranoid, constantly checking my phone, deleting messages immediately, lying about where I'd been and who I'd been with. Sophie started asking more questions. Was I having an affair? Was I unhappy? Did I not love her anymore? I'd reassure her every time. I'd hold her and tell her she was crazy, that I loved her more than anything, that nothing was wrong. She wanted to believe me. I could see it in her eyes, this desperate need to believe that her marriage was still intact, that the man she'd trusted with her whole heart hadn't betrayed her. But something had shifted in her. She became quieter, more withdrawn. She stopped leaving me those little love notes. She stopped initiating affection. We were becoming strangers in our own home. Then, about 4 months after Chicago, Vanessa made good on her threats. She sent Sophie a message on Facebook. I wasn't there when Sophie read it. I was at work, sitting in a meeting about quarterly projections, when my phone started blowing up. Call after call from Sophie, all of which I couldn't answer because I was surrounded by colleagues. When I finally stepped out and called her back, she answered on the first ring. Her voice was different. Flat. Empty. She told me to come home. Right now. The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely grip the steering wheel. I knew what had happened, what Sophie had seen. When I walked through the door, she was sitting on the couch, her laptop open in front of her. She didn't look up when I entered. She just stared at the screen. I asked her what was wrong, even though I knew. She turned the laptop toward me. There it was, Vanessa's message. It was long, detailed, brutal. She told Sophie everything. Chicago, the pregnancy, the miscarriage, the affair that had continued after, in Vanessa's twisted version of events. Some of it was true. Some of it was exaggerated. But it was all damning. Sophie asked me one question. Is it true? I could have lied. I could have told her Vanessa was a psycho, that it was all fabricated, that she was trying to ruin my life out of some delusional obsession. But I was so tired of lying. I told her yes. And I watched my wife break. Sophie didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She didn't cry. She just sat there, staring at me like I was a stranger, and asked me one more question. Did you ever love me? Or was I just the safe choice while you waited for something more exciting? I tried to explain. I told her it had been a horrible mistake, that I'd been weak, that I loved her more than anything and I'd spend the rest of my life making it up to her. She laughed. It was the saddest sound I've ever heard. She told me she'd known something was wrong for months. She'd felt me pulling away, becoming someone she didn't recognize. She tried to talk herself out of her suspicions, tried to be the patient, understanding wife. She'd even blamed herself, wondering if she'd somehow failed me, if she wasn't exciting enough or pretty enough or interesting enough. She told me she started seeing a therapist 2 months earlier because the anxiety of not knowing was eating her alive. The therapist had told her to trust her gut, to ask me directly if I was being unfaithful. But Sophie had been too scared to hear the answer. And now she didn't have to ask. Now she knew. She told me to leave. Just for tonight, she said. She needed space to think, to process, to figure out what she wanted to do. I packed a bag and went to a hotel. I texted her throughout the night, apologizing over and over, begging her to let me come home so we could talk through this. She didn't respond. The next morning, I came back to the house. Her car was gone. I went inside and found her wedding ring on the kitchen counter. No note this time, just the ring sitting there like a tombstone. I called her, straight to voicemail. I called her mom, her sister, her best friend. They all told me the same thing. Sophie didn't want to talk to me, and I needed to respect that. For 2 weeks, I didn't hear from her. I stayed in that hotel room, going to work like a zombie, barely eating, barely sleeping. I must have sent her 50 texts. I told her I'd do anything, counseling, therapy, whatever it took. I told her I'd cut all contact with Vanessa, that I'd quit my job if it meant never seeing her again. Nothing. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, I got an email from a law firm. Divorce papers. Sophie was citing irreconcilable differences and infidelity. She wanted the house, the car, half of our savings. She wanted it done quickly and quietly. I called the lawyer's office, desperate to speak to Sophie, to make her understand that we could fix this. The paralegal who answered told me politely but firmly that all communication needed to go through their office. I'd lost her, but I still didn't understand how completely I'd lost her until I found out what she'd been doing during those 2 weeks of silence. Sophie hadn't just been processing the betrayal. She'd been investigating, and what she found would reveal that my affair with Vanessa was only the beginning of the lies I'd told. But a month after Sophie served me with divorce papers, her sister Hannah called me. She told me Sophie wanted to meet, one final conversation before we signed everything and made it official. I agreed immediately. I would have agreed to anything for just 10 more minutes with her. We met at a coffee shop neither of us had been to before. Neutral territory. Sophie was already sitting at a table in the back when I arrived. She looked different, thinner. Her hair was shorter, but it was her eyes that shocked me. They were hard in a way I'd never seen before. I sat down across from her and immediately started apologizing again. I told her I understood if she could never forgive me, but I needed her to know that what I'd done was the biggest mistake of my life. She held up her hand to stop me. Then she pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. She told me to open it. Inside were printed text messages, dozens of them, between Vanessa and me. But these weren't from Chicago or the months immediately after. These went back further. 2 years. My stomach dropped. Sophie told me she'd hired a private investigator after Vanessa's message. She needed to know the full truth, not just what Vanessa had told her, but everything. The investigator had been thorough. He'd recovered deleted text messages from my phone records, emails, credit card statements showing hotel rooms and dinners I'd claimed were business expenses. Chicago hadn't been the first time. It had been the first time I'd gotten Vanessa pregnant. I'd been having an affair with her for 2 years. Off and on. Whenever things at home felt too routine, too boring, I'd reach out to Vanessa, and she'd be there, ready to make me feel alive again. The worst part? I'd blocked most of it from my own memory. I'd compartmentalized so effectively that I'd actually convinced myself Chicago was an isolated incident, a one-time mistake born from a moment of weakness. But the evidence was right there in black and white. Hundreds of messages where I told Vanessa I was unhappy in my marriage, where I complained about Sophie being too focused on her job, too tired for sex, too predictable. Messages where I'd said I felt trapped. Messages where I'd told Vanessa I loved her. Sophie watched me read through the folder with that same hard expression. When I finally looked up at her, unable to meet her eyes, she spoke. She told me the affair itself had been devastating. But discovering the depth of my lies, the calculated nature of my deception, the fact that I'd been living a double life for years, that had destroyed something fundamental in her. She told me she'd spent the last month trying to figure out if she'd ever really known me at all. Had any of our marriage been real? Had I ever truly loved her? Or had I just been playing a part, biding my time until something better came along? I tried to explain that I had loved her, that I still loved her, that the person in those messages wasn't really me. She asked me who it was then. I didn't have an answer. Sophie told me she'd done a lot of therapy in the past month. Her therapist had helped her understand that she'd been married to 2 different men. The Marcus she thought she knew, and the Marcus who was capable of sustaining a years-long affair while looking her in the eyes every night and telling her he loved her. She said she grieved both versions of me. The Marcus she'd thought existed because he'd been a lie, and the real Marcus because she'd realized she'd never actually known him at all. Then she told me something that made my blood run cold. She was pregnant, 5 weeks along. She'd found out 3 days before Vanessa's message had blown up our marriage. She'd been planning to surprise me with the news, had bought a little onesie that said, "Daddy's Little Miracle," and everything. She'd been so excited to start our family. And then she'd learned that the man she was about to have a baby with had been cheating on her for 2 years. I asked her what she was going to do. She told me she was keeping the baby, but she was doing alone. She didn't want me anywhere near her or our child. Not because she was trying to punish me, but because she genuinely didn't believe I was capable of being the father her child deserved. She'd already spoken to a lawyer about sole custody arrangements. I begged her to reconsider. I told her I'd be a good father, that I'd change, that this baby could be our second chance. She laughed that sad laugh again. She told me she'd spent years making excuses for my behavior. The late nights at work, the emotional distance, the way I'd pull away whenever things got too real. She told herself I was stressed, that I needed space, that I should be more supportive. But the truth was simpler. I'd never been capable of the kind of love she deserved. I'd loved the idea of her, the stable, nurturing wife who made me look good, who took care of me, who never asked for too much. But I'd never loved her enough to actually sacrifice anything for her. Not my ego, not my desires, not my need to feel like I was still young and exciting and free. She told me I'd chosen lust over love at every critical juncture, and now I'd have to live with the consequences. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Sophie got the house, the car, and full custody of our daughter, who was born 7 months after that conversation in the coffee shop. I wasn't there for the birth. Sophie's lawyer had made it clear I wasn't welcome. I met my daughter, Emma, when she was 3 weeks old. Supervised visitation at a social services office. 1 hour, with a caseworker sitting in the corner taking notes. Emma was beautiful. She had Sophie's eyes and nose. When I held her, she stared up at me with this serious expression, like she was trying to figure out who I was. I cried the entire hour. That was 3 months ago. Today, I see Emma for 2 hours every other Saturday at that same social services office. Sophie drops her off and leaves without looking at me. I've tried to apologize to her dozens more times. She never responds. And slowly, I've come to understand something that breaks me all over again every time I think about it. Sophie was right about me. I wasn't capable of the kind of love she deserved. Not because I'm a monster or because I'm fundamentally broken, but because I'd never done the work to become the kind of person who could love someone that completely. I'd grown up thinking love was supposed to be easy, fireworks and passion and constant excitement. When my marriage became comfortable, when the butterflies faded and real life set in, I mistook that stability for boredom. I thought I was missing something. I thought there was supposed to be more. So I went looking for it in hotel rooms and secret text messages, in a woman who made me feel the way I'd felt at 22, when the world still felt full of infinite possibilities. What I didn't understand then, what I've had years of therapy and crushing loneliness to figure out now, is that real love isn't about constant excitement. It's about choosing someone over and over again, especially when things get hard or boring or routine. It's about building something together instead of always looking for the next thrill. Sophie knew that. She'd been building our life, our home, our future, while I was busy tearing it all down from the inside. I lost the love of my life because I couldn't see that what I had was exactly what I needed. I lost my family because I valued momentary pleasure over lasting commitment. I lost the chance to be the father I'd always imagined I'd be because I wasn't man enough to be faithful to my daughter's mother. Vanessa? She moved to a different state about a year ago. I haven't heard from her since. I've learned she's married now. I hope her husband is more than I was capable of being. My parents barely speak to me. Sophie's family certainly doesn't. Most of our mutual friends took her side, as they should have. I live alone in a small apartment on the other side of town. I kept my job somehow. I go to therapy twice a week. I pay child support, which is the least I can do. And every other Saturday, I hold my daughter for 2 hours and try to show her that even though I failed her mother in every possible way, I'm working to be someone she can be proud of. I don't know if Sophie will ever let me be a real part of Emma's life. I don't know if I deserve to be. But I do know this. That note Sophie left, the one that just said, "Finally, I understand it now." Finally, she was free from a marriage that had been built on my lies. Finally, she could stop wondering and worrying and hoping I'd become someone I wasn't. Finally, she could grieve and heal and build a life for herself and our daughter without me dragging them both down. I chose lust over love, and it cost me everything that mattered. If you're reading this and you're tempted, if there's someone at work or online or wherever who makes you feel that old spark, who makes you think maybe you're missing out on something better, I'm begging you to stop. Talk to your partner. go to therapy, do literally anything except what I did. Because that moment of excitement, that illicit thrill, that feeling of being alive again, it's not worth the hollow, echoing silence that comes after. It's not worth looking into your child's eyes and knowing you weren't strong enough to protect her family. It's not worth losing the person who actually loved you. I know that now. I just wish I'd known it then. My name is Marcus, and I chose lust over love. It was the biggest mistake of my life, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it to the one person who deserves it most, my daughter, who never asked to have a father like me, but who I'm determined to become worthy of, even if it takes forever. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like this story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next live story. With love and respect.